I'll be less tense when I'm on Zoom. So thank you all. I want to tell you a little bit about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, HR 763. This has my name at the bottom and also my husband's because he's put these slides together for us. And at the bottom, you can see Ted Deutsch, representative from Florida, just right next to Scott Lewis, also one of the tribe. He introduced the bill originally in 2019 and then originally in the end of 2018 and reintroduced the beginning of 2019. So before I talk specifically about the bill, I want to give a refresher on the concept of carbon pricing and what that means. So this is what we have as our roadmap for climate solutions. And the first option, which none of us would want, is to continue with as usual and see an increase of temperature that would be unmanageable. The second option is regulations and incentives, which we have already, but we could use more of, and a stimulus bill would be great to move things along more quickly. These regulations and incentives can work hand in hand with a carbon price. We've seen that quite a bit in California and also in the Northeast. And what do we mean by a market-driven proposal or putting a price on it? There's two options. There's cap and trade, and that's what we have in California and in the Northeast. There's also a carbon fee or carbon tax. They've had that in British Columbia since 2008. And the different kinds of carbon fee or tax, you can have a revenue neutral or revenue generating. The revenue generating, the government would decide to do what to do with the funds, and with a revenue neutral tax, then the funds go back to the residents and they can spend that money as they choose. So Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act falls into this bucket as a revenue neutral carbon tax. So that's my refresher. We now have 80 co-sponsors on the bill. It's more than any carbon pricing bill has had. And here are the names of the 80 co-sponsors. Our goal was to have this very bipartisan, and when it was introduced originally, it was introduced by 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats in the House. I have to say, unfortunately, when it was reintroduced, only 1 Republican came on, and he has been the only one to join. The other 79 sponsors are all Democrats. So that's definitely been frustrating, but we're still aspiring for a bipartisan bill. Okay, hold on, I can't. Well, your faces are covering up some of the slide for me, but I think I can see it. I want to give you a sense of who.
There's a way to move those away.
Yeah, but I've somehow lost my mouse, so it's okay.
Oh,
okay. I can see it well enough. But thank you. I wanted to give you a sense of who the co-sponsors are. 38 of them have endorsed the Green New Deal. 21 belong to the Congressional Black Caucus, 11 to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, 30 to the Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus, 37 Congressional Progressive Caucus, and 33 to the New Democrat Coalition. And okay, well, oh, here's my mouse. Okay, perfect. Okay. So Sheldon Whitehouse, I'm assuming many of you are familiar with him. He's been such a climate champion over the years, and he is very supportive of carbon pricing. He says the IPCC in their latest report said a carbon fee is one of the best tools we have to prevent catastrophic climate change, and it's supported by virtually every serious economist. Here's a list of quite a few economists. 3,500 US economists have endorsed the concept, 4 former chairs of the Federal Reserve, 27 Nobel laureates, 15 former chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors, and 2 former secretaries of the US Department of Treasury. As far as Jewish support for HR 763, we're very proud to have endorsement from the Jewish Climate Action Network out of Massachusetts, from Hazon, Jewish Education and Info Council in California, Social Justice Committee of the Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center, and thus far more than a dozen. We are looking always for more rabbis. Okay, here are a few slides giving you a sense of how it works. The bill would put a fee on fossil fuels at the source, the mine, well, or the port. And as I said in the earlier slide, 100% of that net revenue would go back to households as a dividend. There would be a carbon border adjustment to encourage other countries to implement a similar policy. And there would also be a limited regulatory adjustment. The benefits of this bill: 40% less carbon emissions over the next 12 years. This is what we've modeled. It's good for people. The dividend, after 10 years, a family of 4 would get an annual dividend of almost $3,500, and they could spend that money any way they want. They could spend it on saving for solar panels. They could spend it on going out to dinner. It would be, we wouldn't be telling them how to spend their money. It's good for people by lowering pollution. We save nearly 300,000 lives in 2030 because of the improved air quality. And it's good for the economy, which we all know that spurring the green energy economy will create new jobs. And not just in the green sector, but because people have more money in their pocket in the local sectors and in healthcare and other areas. And it's revenue neutral, which is appealing to groups that are concerned about growing the size of government, because the money does not go to increase the size of government, it goes back to the people. And that's it. Here's my email address, and also there is a website for the bill, energyinnovationact.org. Tells you all the supporters, it explains it, and that's it. So if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
This is Howard. I have a question. Was there any calculation of energy cost savings for companies that on the one hand maybe spending more for fossil-based energy because the price of that is the fee added on top of that, but to the extent that that renewable energy displaces the fossil energy in the fuel, as an energy source, as a fuel supply, as an electricity source, that they would be paying less. Has that been calculated in somehow?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I could look into it. And there, I'm taught you people on this call who are all familiar with the bill. So Yonatan or Bob or John, if you have any response, feel free to speak.
Sure. The Citizens Climate Lobby has done extensive studies of the economic impact and the emissions reductions. And, these are very, 150-page long reports. And yes, there would be a very strong incentive for industries to move to renewables. There are also provisions in the bill to incentivize carbon sequestration. So it would help promote things such as, people are looking at making concrete with seawater and capturing emissions from power plants and so forth. So it's probably the most thoroughly modeled of the 8 carbon fee and dividend bills that are out there. And by far, it has the greatest number of sponsors. Judy mentioned that when the bill was first introduced in the prior session of Congress, it had more Republican co-sponsors than it does now. And it's not because they've changed their mind. That the loss of co-sponsors has to do with the fact that a number of Republicans either chose not to run for re-election or were primaried out or lost their general election. So one of the related things in the House in the prior session was the Climate Solutions Caucus, which grew up to 90 members, 45 Democrats, 45 Republicans, and it was designed to be bipartisan. People had to join in pairs. Unfortunately, after the 2018 congressional elections, nearly half of the Republican members of that caucus did not return to Congress. I was just on a call earlier today with EDF, and they're very frustrated that there's this shrinking bench of Republican members of Congress who are part of the caucus and who are working with them on environmental legislation, and they're struggling to find new ways to get more Republicans on board with a broad range of environmental bills, including this one.
I think I might also just to pick up with Howard's question directly. Howard, you were asking how much companies would save by by converting over to renewable energy. I think that I don't know that that's something we can model directly, because that just depends on the choices that each company makes. But obviously, the idea is that there would be incentives at all levels of the economy to make that transition because of the price on carbon. So I think that's probably the simplest answer that I can come up with.
The other key thing to point out is that the fee goes up each and every year. So any industry that looks forward and is doing a 5-year or a 10-year plan can see sticking with fossil fuel energy is going to be increasingly costly the longer they stay with it. And so that also makes for, and there are provisions in the bill that if reductions aren't coming down fast enough, then the rate of increase in the fee goes up.
I like that.
I've got a question for Judy. Judy, and I asked her this before, and actually I just wanted her to address give that same answer. I asked her that one of the concerns that I had with this was that, some of the folks in the IPCC or others saying, look, we got this window of 10 years to get this down to, reduce significant amounts of greenhouse gases. And if you look at the bill, they're kind of projecting out clearly beyond that to get this done. So what do you say to people who say, look, that's not fast enough?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for asking. It's definitely something that's come up. It came up with the new organization, Dainu. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. And I think what's really important to remember is that this is about all of the above. This is one tool in the toolbox of getting us where we need to go. This is not the be all and end all of climate policy, but this is the stimulus and the jump starting and sort of pushing us beyond this initial inertia. We need to go with it. This is not something that we're proposing is done in vacuum. This is something that economists have recommended for years, that to put the correct price signal out there, but that doesn't exclude bringing in all kinds of other policies to move things even faster. But this is the foundation which will allow all those other pieces, like helping coal miners and helping migrants and protecting, managing our forests better and water conservation. this is the foundation that will allow those other bills to be effective. But without this strong foundation, it being kind of a piecemeal approach. Thanks for letting me address that. Any other questions or any thoughts about HDI's investment?
At the end of your slideshow, in somewhere other than in the slideshow, which we don't have, the rest of us don't have.
Sure.
How's
Okay,
that?
thank you.
There we
Great.
go.
All right, I stopped
will-
the share. That's what I was on share mode. Sorry about that. Okay, you finish your question there?
No, I'm going to share the
Andy?
Oh, it looks like John Brown already put in the chat the website, and I'll put my email. I'll send you my email also if you have.
Okay, in the chat room. Okay, great.
But Stephanie was asking about, there was a question from Stephanie.
The endorsement. I think, yeah, sorry, thank you. Actually, I do think, and I don't know if Stephanie, you saw that earlier. Stephanie was asking about the Green New Deal, and we did do an endorsement about a year ago. There were faith principles of the Green New Deal that we actually endorsed as a group. I don't know if I did that just by asking the steering committee. I don't think we did it in a meeting, but I think it was through an email. So I think for purposes of you know, the question is, you know, do we endorse this? And my thought would be just to sort of have a, you know, if it's this, so sounds okay, just to sort of have, you know, any opposition, and then we could have, if there's no opposition, have a consensus endorsement of it, without necessarily having to have a specific vote in this group, you know, given that we got the email out about that. So I don't know, Stephanie, what do you think about that? We do have some folks. Andy joined the call, and we have Ellen, and Ellen might want to, and Andy might want to say a quick hello and tell us where they are before we get into that.
Hi, so I'm Andy. I live in the Boston area. I think I'm going to be here for a long time. And
I hope so.
I'm a member of a synagogue in this area, a Reformed synagogue, of course. I am also doing a lot of volunteer work for the Jewish Climate Action Network, MASS. I see David's on the line. David Schreiber is also here. And I don't have much more to say. I certainly haven't been able to do as much as I want, but I've been doing a little bit of organizing around the climate.
All right, thank you.
And Ellen Siegel, I'm in Gainesville, Florida. Thanks to HDI and JCAN, we got a green team kicked off, and our energy audit, and the board has approved money for insulation and smart thermostats, and we got a bid for solar. So it's pretty exciting at the micro level. Of course, everything now is absolute dead stop because of the virus. So I'm on this call. I'm going to have to jump off. I just wanted to do something besides think about lines at Publix and you know, washing my hands 80 times a day. So thanks for moving forward, even though you know, at least my mind is not really on the bigger picture yet. It's on just.
All right. Well, we're glad you're here. Thanks very much for joining us.
And forgive me for jumping off pretty soon.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. I just want to check with you. What do you're thinking as a process does that sound sufficient for you if this group were to endorse something like that, or you think you would like something more formal as an entire group or something?
How does Judy feel about it? And the folks that Jonathan and the other people that you're working with. I mean, I could certainly go either way.
Yeah, I just posted in the chat. I'm sorry I have to leave, but you know, whatever process people feel most comfortable with, you know, if this group feels like if people here are in favor of endorsing, I think that would be fantastic and certainly kind of helpful in continuing just to move this forward. You know, the more support we can get, the more people who, you know, say that this makes sense, then the more we can kind of keep it going. So I'll just say that and say thank you very much to Judy for the presentation, great presentation, and to Scott for organizing. I'll say goodbye.
Great,
Bye.
thank you.